Hi all and welcome to Parker's Reefs. In today's episode, I'm going to give a 1 month review on this new product from Reef Revolution, Polyp Feast Coral Food. Okay, to start things off here, I will point out that this review was done with a sample that was given to me for this review. So, full disclosure, I didn't buy this product. It was given to me for a test. You can trust that I'll always remain impartial, guys. I like to give honest reviews, and this video will be no different. So, let's jump into it and have a look. This food here, it's you can see it's really heavily stacked with protein, a little bit of fatty acids, not a lot of moisture, not a lot of ash, which means it's pretty much just all good stuff. And you can see here with a close up of the make of it, it's quite grainy. It's very fine, but it's grainy. And when you mix it up, you can still see those little grains in the water. So let's jump in and give it a go. All right, so we got the Reef Revolution Polyp Feast Coral Food here, and the directions say that we need to mix 1/4 teaspoon per 100 litres. So that's a full teaspoon per 400 litres. Just checking my maths there, which it sort of says that's the minimum. You can do double that for a heavily stocked tank, or that much for a lightly stocked tank. To me, that's a lot. Depending on, I guess, whether you've got a lot of LPS or softies. I've got a mixed reef, but it's probably SBS dominated, or at least SBS biased. So I'm going to stick to the lighter end of that stocking. So I'm going to put probably even less than the minimum. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons worth of this food into some water, and we'll mix it up. And then it does say to turn the wave makers off and to target feed. I'm a little bit more of a broadcast feed kind of guy. Otherwise, I'd be target feeding every coral, and it would take me probably 3 days. So I'm going to leave the flow on, pour the mixture in, let it broadcast. Then I'll turn the flow off, just so that all the corals get a chance to feed it on it. So let's mix it up and see how we go. All right, so I've got just a cup of tank water here, and I've got my Polyp Feast. And as discussed, I'm going to put 2 teaspoons in. So you can see it's a pretty fine powder. It's pretty fine, but you'll see when we mix it up. There's 1 teaspoon. There's another teaspoon. It seems like a lot despite being on the lower end of the dosage rate, but I did check my phosphates this morning and they had bottomed out at 0, so I figure I may as well give it some coral food today and see if that raises phosphates up a little and maybe gives the corals a little bit more to feed on, I guess, because we all know that 0 phosphates is not a good thing. So what I like about this Polyp Feast is, despite the powder being really fine, you'll notice when we mix it up, it doesn't completely turn into a soup. There still are little grains or little bits of food dust, I guess. So when you feed it, you can actually see it in the water and you can see the corals grab it. I've been using this for a month now, and I've been using it maybe once a week, twice a week, depending on where my phosphates and nitrates are at. Always dosing this 2 teaspoons to my main tank. And so far the coral's been responding really well. So hopefully we can catch it on video this time, and you'll be able to see how it goes. But just before I switch cameras, I'll just keep giving this a stir, and we'll let it just absorb into the water for maybe about 5 minutes, and then I'll tip it into the tank. Okay, so here we are with my main display tank. I've still got all my wave makers on, and I'm just going to broadcast feed that in. You can see the big cloud go. Interestingly, the fish obviously like this stuff too, and my smaller fish like my chromis and my glass cardinals go absolutely berserk for it. The big guys don't quite know how to eat it, but they still get excited thinking that they can obviously smell food and think it's coming their way. So you can see I've left the, you can already see the little particles in the water. It creates quite a dust cloud, but I'm going to leave the wave makers on for just a little bit longer, just to make sure that it's completely spread throughout the tank, and also stir a bit of a feeding response from my corals, and then I'll turn the flow off. And with the flow off, we'll get a bit of a closer look at some of these corals and just see whether they're grabbing onto it and how they respond. Alright, but just before I turn the flow off, I thought I'd get in nice and close and just show you how much of a sandstorm is created when you put this Polyp Feast in the water. It, as I said, it does not completely dissolve, and it does remain as little bits of food floating throughout the water. They look almost like fish eggs if you've ever fed them before. And it just seems to be something that the corals, like the polyps, can actually reach out and grab, as opposed to just putting almost a liquid phosphate in the tank. this does put little parcels of food, and it really does get a good reaction out of not just LPS but SPS as well. Okay, so I've switched the flow off and just grabbed a little time lapse of my Duncan coral here, just grabbing onto that Polyp Feast and chowing down. You can see it looks pretty angry, and it's grabbing hold of every single grain that it can. And this time lapse was ran probably over about 30-40 minutes with the flow off. You can see the flow's come back on now. And yeah, the Duncan really seemed to love it. That being said, the Duncan will grab hold of almost any food that's floating by, and will give a reaction like that. So I thought while this time lapse was running, I'd bring out the DSLR and we'd have a look and see how some other corals reacting. So you can see this bubble coral here. It normally doesn't give me much of a feeding response, but you can see the little feeder sweepers sticking out there, which is a great sign. Okay, next up we've got this leather. It's kind of hard to catch in the act, but the polyps did come out and we're reaching for those little dots. So you can see a couple on screen there. Next up is this recordia. I love the way recordias just react when there's food in the water. They just look weird, and this one was no exception. And not to be forgetting SPS, I tried to get as nice footage as I can. I apologise for the shakiness, but you can see my purple and green acro here. Just the polyps reaching out, trying to grab a couple of those little bits floating by, and this SPS piece here also was doing the same. You can see the little white dots in the water, and the polyps were reacting and actually even sliming up towards some of them, which was an incredible sign. Okay, so I guess to wrap this video up, I'll just give you a bit of a tour around and showing the corals once the flow's back on and how they reacted. You can see that bubble coral there, crazy. My other pieces there, just giving a good reaction as well. And one last thing, I'll just show you, the skimmer does go pretty berserk, pulling out any excess, which is a great sign. And I guess that's where I'd like to sort of finish up this review, in that I've used it for a month now, and I've seen some really good results. The corals absolutely react really well and consume it. Whilst it's, I call it a long-term test, it's only been 1 month. I can't say I've seen any visual difference in the corals, whether that be coloration or growth, but I have seen them consume it, and that can only be a good thing. The other thing I've checked is I've kept a close eye on my phosphates and nitrates throughout testing, and whilst I have been dosing on the lighter side, I can comfortably say I've seen a really, really small spike in nitrate and phosphate, and normally as soon as I dose it a day or two later, it's been stripped back down again. So big shout out to the guys for sending through this sample of a product. Whilst I got it for free, I can say that I'll be a customer and I'll be buying this furthermore, because yeah, my tank's really enjoying it. So if you're looking for a new coral food, get behind this Aussie company and give it a shot. Thanks guys, bye.